All right, hi everyone. Welcome back to this edition of Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV Sports Talk Live. Sal Majorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. As we're kind of settled into the off season here at this point, Sal, and we've covered a lot of ground with this team, but things are about to ramp up again as we hit April and the draft is on the horizon. How you doing?
Yeah, I am good. I missed you, pal. Where you been? I was wondering where you forgot all about me here.
Well, it's been what, a week and a half since we've done one of these?
It's been a little while. We've got some catching up to do on the pod here. They've done some things.
I've mentioned to you. So our old, my wife Lori and I are kind of a rescue dog. We've had a number of them. Currently 3 in the house right now, and our oldest just underwent ACL surgery.
Ugh.
So on the injury report, little off-season surgery. She's doing all right, though. Had to go up to Canada for that. So
nobody in the States could handle an ACL?
Well, it's a long story, but she's a little bit on the older side with, anesthesia and all of those things. And we found a great place right near Toronto. Couldn't get into Cornell, which is a very, well-regarded veterinary. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer to a short question, but she's doing well. She's resting out here, and I'll go back to icing and all kinds of exercises and rehab. And so what have you been up to? The Yankees are going now. So I couldn't help but notice your Twitter feed.
Yes, baseball season has begun, so my mood will start to get dark, as you know. Would have been really dark yesterday if Devin Williams had completed the disastrous blown save, but he survived. So yes, Yankees are full bore, but a lot of things happening with the Bills, so that never really gets turned off. So wherever you want to go, I will follow your lead here, my friend.
All right, we'll start kind of with a wide lens and narrow in as we go. Let's get the Bet Online mention out of the way if we can here, and it's great to hear that they have extended their support of the Believe Network and this show. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all of the March Madness. Even if your bracket's busted, Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with a free Sweet 16 bracket as well, and live betting on every remaining tournament game. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to MLB, NHL, and MMA, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. Bet Online, the game starts here. That's what I get for trying to do this show without my glasses on, Sal.
There you go. You're getting old, my friend.
All right. So here we go. At this point, we could look back on free agency. We touched on a lot of it on our last show, right up to the point where the Bills dealt Kaiir Elam to the Dallas Cowboys. That happened literally within like 3 minutes of us signing off on our last show. I don't know that we necessarily need to spend time on that, but certainly at that position, I think. I think they did some good things in free agency. Bosa is at the top of that list if he can stay healthy. I think that's exactly the type of player that they need. But there are some gaps left in this roster and some positions that need to be addressed still if this team wants to, I think, truly once again contend for a Super Bowl. So, how do you see it coming out of free agency?
Yeah, look, they clearly made their case that they had to upgrade the defensive line, and they want to do that with some veteran guys at the start. Now, this has always been Beane's philosophy in free agency, is he wants to fill the main gaps in his roster with veteran free agents where it's possible. And they did have a little bit more room to play with on the salary cap this year, certainly more than last year. And he went in pretty good. He made some telling moves, I thought, especially on the defensive line. Joey Bosa being the big swing, but only for a year. And then Michael Hoyt and Ogunjobi address needs, one at tackle and one at that Dwayne Smoot inside-outside position that they needed to fill. Unfortunately, we got the news that there's going to be 6-game suspensions. So that leaves a little bit of room now on the roster because they've got 6 games they've got to cover So they're going to have to do more to upgrade those positions. And that's what the draft's going to be for. But back to my point, Bean likes to hit these key areas in free agency so then he can go into the draft with a specific plan. And, the Bills always talk about drafting the best player available. And he's sort of put himself in a position to do that with what he's done in free agency. But that still also means, Adam, that you could still pick the best player available, but target a need. And the number one need on this team right now, you could be 1A and 1B, is defensive tackle and cornerback. I don't think there's any doubt. And because of Ogunjobi's situation, now tackle, if he hadn't gotten suspended, you could make the case that they've already got their 4 rotational defensive tackles for 2025 in place. Now they don't. So not only do you have to get a guy and start getting him, in the program for the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to have to draft a guy who probably has to play right away. So that changes the calculus a little bit. But again, it's defensive tackle and cornerback. And he clearly, by what he did in free agency, has set the pace for that approach.
Before we move on to a discussion of the draft, I want to go back to Hoyt and Ogunjobi. And I know this is ground a lot of people have covered already. But since we haven't spoken since that all went down, and for benefit of our viewers and listeners, what's your take on kind of what happened there? With Hoyt, they knew what they were dealing with. Ogunjobi, they didn't, and kind of got blindsided by that a little bit. What's your take on how that was all sort of handled?
Yeah, I understand I understand the Hoyt situation. They knew about it going in, but they liked the player. We came to find out that they actually pursued him last year, but he was a restricted free agent, and he ended up going back to the Rams. So when he becomes unrestricted, they still had the same interest, and I understand why. This looks like a nice player to plug into their defense. And they were going to go long-term on him. They gave him a three-year contract. So you could take the 6-game suspension. It's not ideal, but with a 3-year contract, he's only 27 years old. This is a guy who's going to be here for a little while. The Ogunjobi thing, Adam, I just did not understand it. And I thought Brandon Beane's explanation was kind of BS about how there were no tackles left by the time this happened. That's not true at all. There were other tackles in free agency. Now, maybe they weren't the same fit that Ogunjobi is going to be for the Bills eventually, but there were guys he could have pivoted to. And then again, he's got the draft where there is a platitude of defensive tackles available in this draft. He can get a guy first, second, or third round that could probably come right in and play. So to eat 6 games on a 1-year contract, now granted, they did get the money down. If you noticed on the contract, it went from a 1-year 8.3. I think the cap hit now is down to I don't know what, 5 something maybe. So they obviously they renegotiated the deal. Sure. So that makes it a little more palatable that it's not that $8 million hit that we thought it was going to be originally. But I just don't really see the point. Guy's 31 years old and he hasn't really played that well over the last few seasons. So I don't know. They loved him. And they went ahead and did it, but it sure didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, it really didn't. As you said, it's a 1-year deal, whereas Hoyt, you're dealing with a multi-year. I believe that's a 3-year contract.
Yeah,
And a player they had targeted. So the dynamic of each signing is a little bit different. But that is something. It's unfortunate how all of that came down and what ultimately, in terms of games, it is going to cost them. All right, let's touch on cornerback here. I do want to get into the draft, but there is still some free agent options sort of out there. What's the approach? What should it be? I do think they absolutely need to address it in the draft, right? But I don't feel comfortable with the idea, given where this team is at and what they're hoping to accomplish in this Super Bowl window. I don't feel particularly comfortable with the idea of putting a rookie in there. And I like Dane Jackson. I think he's played above his draft status at times. He's a 7th-round pick. A former 7th-rounder. He's a guy who's delivered. It's good to bring him back. It's good depth, obviously, but he's not the answer. I feel like they need to find one from whoever might still be available out there.
Yeah, I think that the ideal plan is going to be to still sign a free agent. I mean, I think like you said, they're in a win now mode, and rookie cornerbacks, it's tricky. You don't always find Tre'Davious White in the first round who steps right in day one as a starter for whatever it was, 5 or 6 years. So I think they've got to find somebody in free agency who can come right in and be the starter. Because as you said, Dane Jackson, if Dane Jackson's that guy, there's a problem here. That just can't be the plan moving forward. He's fine, like you said, as a depth guy. You throw him in if you've got an injury for a week or two. So I did have a little bit of a problem with that, Adam, in that, okay, what are you dipping back into that for? You know what that is. Why not be different? Yeah, I know he knows your system and you like him and all that, but he's a limited player. Why couldn't you have tried to get a different face in here who maybe had a different skill set? That being said, that player still would have been a depth addition. They need to go out and find a guy who can start right away. And then you pick a guy, a cornerback, in the first or second round who is going to be in the system and coming on. And maybe in a perfect world, if you've signed a corner to a 1-year deal, maybe this rookie either beats him out in training camp or takes over at some point in the season if he's good enough. So they need to, for sure. I still say, get a veteran guy. There's been a lot of smoke around Asante Samuel Jr. That hasn't happened yet. Played pretty well for the Chargers last year. I don't know exactly if he fits their style. McDermott's got the tie because he coached his father briefly back in Philadelphia. That's a guy that we keep seeing the name pop up on. You mentioned before we went on the air, but I don't really put too much stock in it. Stephon Gilmore, who was a long time ago Bill's first-round pick, but he's 34, 35 years old at this point.
He'd be 35 in the season. He'd be 35. I think he was 2012 first-round pick.
Yeah. So, and that's probably going to cost you a little bit of money. He's not going to come in on a good old boy network contract because he's a former Bills draft pick. So I would look for a younger type of free agent, a guy in that 26, 27-year-old range, and then hit it in the draft. I don't know if the value is going to be there at number 30 for a cornerback, but certainly in the second day somewhere they've got those 2 picks in the second round. You should be able to get a guy, a better value pick maybe, who can come in and, like I said, maybe win that job outright. So that's got to be. I mean, we've gone into this draft in many drafts, Adam. And we think we know exactly what they need, and then they throw a curveball, they throw a slider, they throw a knuckleball at us that you never saw coming. But man, it is so obvious to me that D tackle and cornerback are 2 places they have to hit in those first 2 days.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And so let's go to defensive tackle. And I've seen some of the mocks. I know you've written on some of that and kind of opined on a lot of these picks, which is kind of how we operate at this time of the year. Is a lot of projection, especially when you're drafting down at 30. But Brandon Beane has obviously shown the inclination and the ability in the past and the willingness to move up. They might have to do that, and it might be worth doing that given their overall haul and draft picks this year for a guy named Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan. I mean, he seems to kind of, 6'4", 331. They need to get bigger and heavier up front. That's been a shortcoming on this football team. You park him on the interior in there, he would be an upgrade. That's the kind of the philosophical shift that we talked about to drafting that type of a player. I mean, I think it's critical. I think it's an area that they need to bolster and improve in and kind of change their approach. And he might be a guy, if they can get to him, who might provide some answers for them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you go through a lot of the mock drafts, and I kind of have to pay attention. I'm not a mock draft person. I never do one. I think it's kind of a waste of time. But there's a lot of guys that are in the know in the draft community. And I will point to 2 of the best, right? Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah are 2 of the most respected guys in that industry. And they both have Kenneth Grant mocked in their latest mock drafts to the Bills. Now, I wonder, like you, I don't know that he's going to be there. That size and that athleticism, you don't see that all the time in a college defensive tackle. And I've got a feeling that he's going to go somewhere I don't think he'll go in the teens, but I'm certainly thinking in the 20s for sure. And I think the Bills, if they truly love him and if that's the guy they want, they're going to have to go up and get him. I don't think he gets down to number 30. Is it worth it? Absolutely, it would be worth it because he, to me, like you just said, he fits exactly what they need, or at least we think what they need. 330 pounds in the middle of that defensive line, and he's got the athleticism. He's probably similar to Ed Oliver in terms of getting upfield, but he has the girth. He's got 40 more pounds on his body to hold up at the point of attack. So he seems like a match made in heaven for the Bills. Again, we have no idea what the Bills are thinking. We're always just throwing darts at a dartboard when it comes to this stuff. But I would have to think they did meet him at the combine. It'll be interesting to see if they bring him in for a 30 visit. I haven't seen the latest list, but he wasn't. I saw one a few days ago, and he was not on that list. So I don't know. Maybe sometimes teams don't bring a guy in for a 30 because you're trying to deflect attention,
Sure.
right? And
Right.
make sure teams aren't thinking you're interested in him. So, I don't know how that'll play out, but that's a guy that I would love to see in Buffalo. I think he'd be a huge help for that D line.
Well, I think the Philadelphia Eagles were the model, right? And what they were able to do
Yeah.
in the Super Bowl and getting pressure with 4. And we've seen this historically. And it's that inside pressure. I remember we had Bill Polian, Hall of Fame general manager, former Buffalo Bills GM, of course, the architect of the Super Bowl era teams. Bill Polian, this was right after Ed Oliver signed his contract. So this would have been a couple of years back. But there was so the fan base was a little upset given Oliver's inconsistency. And Polian defended the move. And I bring this up because he defended it this way. And this is why these types of players are so valuable, because they're not easy to find. And Polian said, all of the great quarterbacks, you can go back to, whether it's John Elway, Jim Kelly, he listed as an example, Tom Brady, and understanding mobility of these guys in this current generation. It's changed a little bit, but the point remains the same. Polian's quote was, you could send 2 heat-seeking missiles off of the edge, and the great quarterbacks, it's not going to bother them. It's the inside pressure where they can't set their feet in the pocket that really causes problems, right? And a guy like Grant with, as you said, that size and the athleticism, you compare him to a guy like Oliver, whose strength is to be able to get upfield. That's his selling point, can get, leverage because he's a little bit smaller and get that inside pressure. This is the type of player. He's an example of the type of player they need to be able to achieve what the Eagles did, for example, in their Super Bowl win over the Chiefs, and deal with the caliber of quarterbacks they're going to have to, as this window extends over the next, over multiple seasons, what exists in the AFC, because it's not getting any easier given the cast of QBs they have in this conference.
Yeah. You pressure up the middle. It's so vitally important. You get in the defensive tackles are the closest guys on the defense to the quarterback. Get in his face immediately. That's always been the philosophy with the Bills. They've tried to do it. That's why Ed Oliver was drafted. They thought he was going to give them that immediate upfield push. He was strong enough in college where he had, he could get into the quarterback's face right away. Whether he sacked him or not, that wasn't the biggest issue. Get him in his face, make him go left or right, and that's where your edge rushers come in, and you hem the guy in and get your sack, or at least force him to get rid of the ball quickly. That is so important. And the Bills, Oliver's done it to an extent. But as you said, the key word, you mentioned it 5 minutes ago, the inconsistency with Oliver has been maddening. So I think you bring a guy like Kenneth Grant in, who, I think could provide that steady. And Grant would be a one tech. I think he would be a one tech for the Bills. He'd be the Daquan Jones substitute. But if you've got 2 guys in the middle of your line who could get upfield and push the quarterback back in the pocket, and one guy's doing it with 40 extra pounds on his body, that to me would make a big difference in this Bills defense.
Right, exactly. It's what they've lacked. It's continuously been a shortcoming, as we've talked about, really since the first AFC Championship loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. They've tried to address it, and they have not had the answers ultimately to this point. So it'll be interesting to see what their approach is. Going to have a lot of opportunities, obviously, in the run-up to the draft at the end of April to speculate and discuss these various points. One other note, kind of outside of the Bills organization, involving a former player, Stephon Diggs, finalized earlier today as we record this, in fact, on this Thursday. 3-year, $69 million deal, Diggs to the New England Patriots after a year with the Houston Texans. He obviously coming off an ACL injury, so it remains to be seen if he's healthy. Interesting on that contract with the guaranteed money. I believe it's $26 million guaranteed. So New England, can get out of it if they need to. That's how they're handling the risk situation there. I don't know. I mean, I think he's a guy who can help them. He's the type of player they should try and surround a young quarterback in Drake May, with Vrabel as the head coach over there now. I don't know how quickly they progress this year, but they seem, to me anyway, to be the team that's most poised to rise up at some point to challenge Buffalo atop the AFC East.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked a lot of things they've done in this offseason, starting with Mike Vrabel, who, we think is a pretty good head coach. And Drake May, I mean, of the other teams in the Bills division, he's the second best quarterback, I would think, right now. He's certainly better than Justin Fields of the Jets. And, well, I shouldn't say that. Tua, I think Tua is a nice player, but I'm not sure what the Dolphins are doing. Drake May is a guy that, had shown, I thought he played pretty well as a rookie. You start building around him now. Diggs is going to go in there. He'll be, unless they pick a guy in the draft, which is very possible, he's going to be their best receiver, at least at the start of, say, training camp. You got to believe. I don't know what his health is going to be. His ACL was like week 6 or 7 or 8, I think it was.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not sure he'll even be available at the start of the year. It's possible. I mean, Von Miller tried to do it, but I don't know when he'll be truly available. But, he's not the same Steph Diggs who was here. He's not going to be the same dynamic player, 160 targets, 115 catches. But he'll be a nice addition for Drake May, a reliable guy, something that he certainly didn't have in his rookie season there. So, yeah, he'll help them. I don't know if it'll be more than for a year, but, it was a good decision. They've got money to spend. You might as well put pieces around your quarterback. I don't know that Bills fans should be overly worried about, Steph Diggs taking them over the top. I don't think he's that player anymore, but he's going to be an upgrade to whatever they've had last year for sure.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I agree with you on May. He's the guy. I mean, there's comparisons. Bo Nix in Denver is another one. The ability to move. I mean, they show a lot of the same characteristics. It's funny, where a lot of them are compared to Josh Allen now, based on some of the dynamic. And I was impressed with May when the Bills saw him twice toward the end of the season, or once really.
It was really only once. Yeah,
it was once in Orchard Park. That particular game, they played the Patriots twice, but played May once. So I feel like he brings a lot of the same characteristics. And with him on a rookie contract and the Patriots with all of that cap room and draft capital and that sort of a thing, I mean, they're in a position to add key pieces around him and get the most out of him before they have to pay him long-term money.
Yeah, and they've made some really nice moves on defense. So they've got a pretty good defense now. They've got 2 great cornerbacks there. They've upgraded their defensive line. They're going to be a much different team to face Buffalo this year, or in 2025. Now, like you said, they've got to get some things going with their offense, but they've got draft capital, and they're picking high. They have the 4th pick, I think, right now. They pick high in every round. I don't know how many picks they have overall, but they've got some room to do some things there. And it's, you got to start worrying about the Patriots now, because Vrabel is a guy who knows what he's doing, right? They didn't have that. Once Belichick left, the guy who was just there, Mayo.
Gerard Mayo.
That was a bad decision to go with him. So the Patriots are going to be back on the map, and they're going to be, I'm not going to say there'll be a problem for the Bills, but I think they're going to be their stiffest competition, maybe in the division this time around.
I think so. I think so too. And you never know when you bring in, and this certainly applies to some of the points we had brought up earlier. For example, if the Bills draft a cornerback relatively high, you don't know when you have good young talent, right? You don't know how quickly it's going to develop. Sometimes it can happen pretty quickly. Other times it kind of drags out, if at all. But I think the Patriots, when you have a guy like Vrabel now, Mayo was over his head. Vrabel's a guy with an established track record, former Patriot. To me, just seems like a tremendous fit to be the head coach over there. I remember, were you at the game? It was a Buffalo game when he was head coach of the Titans. Obviously, at the time, I think it was at halftime. They inducted him into the Patriots Hall of Fame.
That was the game that the Patriots beat them, remember? Yeah. Mac Jones led the game-winning drive that day in 23, it was.
Yeah.
And they inducted Vrabel into the Hall of Fame. And I remember there was the talk then that he should have been Belichick's replacement going into 24. It was all set up to do that, and it just never worked out that way. So they waited a little bit too long. And they went 3-14, and they got a bunch of great draft picks and salary cap space now. So maybe it was the plan all along, Adam. Maybe they're just thinking one step ahead. Let's get Mayo. We're going to suck this year. We're going to have all this draft capital and salary cap space, and then we're going to turn it around and go. So it might have been the evil empire's plan all along.
I'll tell you what. I mean, I do think there was a bond between Robert Kraft and Mayo, and he was a guy they were kind of, had internally been grooming and they kind of very quickly moved him and into that spot without much consideration to the outside. He was just over.
I know there was consternation in New England when that happened. I mean, there was media guys that were like wondering why was he the hand picked, guy to replace Belichick when there were probably, why didn't you go outside the organization? But he'd been a player there. They'd been grooming him as an assistant coach, not too long, but he was an assistant coach on their staff. And I think Robert Kraft looks back at it and says, yep, I blew that one. I had Belichick for 20 years, and that was great, but we definitely blew it this time. They get a mulligan. Mike Vrabel happens to be available, and boom, there you go. And he'll probably be there for, I would estimate that Vrabel's going to be there for a while. They're going to dig him in and give him a chance to go.
Yeah, an established guy with a track record, has as a head coach, knows what he needs to do with the various resources and capital that the Patriots have to surround May with the necessary pieces to again try and unseat the Buffalo Bills atop the AFC East. A lot of time on New England. But
what do you think about here? So I got a question for you. What are they doing with? What do you think they should do with James Cook? Because I've written about this extensively already. The Christian Benford extension is going to be difficult. It's going to be expensive. And you may not see that happen if they do get the extension offer to him. You may not see that happen until maybe during the season. But he has a lot of leverage, Benford, with the cornerbacks that have signed free agent deals already. His price is skyrocketing, and it's going to be tough for the Bills. I think it's going to be tough for them to keep him. So then you turn to James Cook, and I remain on the side of let James Cook play 2025 and see where that goes. But
I'm right there.
I'm not extending him.
I'm not
unless it works.
No, I'm not worried about. Right. I mean, it's not going to be $15 million.
No way.
I mean, Brandon Beane has said as much, and I get it. And Cook has been a little bit too public for my liking about that. And I think internally, I don't think Beane and McDermott like that at all. I mean, he can do what he's going to do, and they're going to say what they're going to say about him in a public setting. But, I mean, a lot of that should be behind closed doors. Regardless of that, I understand, the economics of the running back position and there's some tension there and some friction in terms of what these guys want, what they feel they deserve, and what the market is willing to bear for them. If you can make something work with Cook, then fine, like you said. But I am perfectly content. He would be, if they let him play out 2025, fine. He's going to be highly motivated from a financial standpoint to prove his worth once again. And I don't want to kind of soft step this. I mean, he's an important part of their offense. I mean, what he brings apart from the other backs they have, I'm not going to say he isn't a unique player in that respect, but with those resources, with what they feel they need to do, I'd be happy to, not happy, I'd prefer they get something done, but I'd be willing to let him play out 2025. If they have to, then use the franchise tag.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they rarely have used it. In fact, they haven't used it. This regime has never used it. Cordy Glenn was the last guy, and that was like 2015 or 16. They don't like using the franchise tag, but in this case, it might be very beneficial because the running back franchise tag is the second lowest of all the positions. Only special teamers get a lower franchise tag. So right now it's 13.2 million. Next year it's projected to be 14 million. Yeah. You could always slap the 1 year tag. Now, the downside of that is it's 14 million all accelerated to the cap in 1 year. But again, you'd get that fifth year out of a running back. And we all know that, running back is a position where there is depreciation pretty quickly. If you get 5 years out of a guy and they would get, say, 4.5 because he was kind of he was a bit player as a rookie with Devin Singletary here. If you were to get 4.5 good years out of James Cook, you've probably done pretty well. So that's a very real possibility in my eyes, even though they don't like using the franchise tag. I think we'll get an indication, Adam, in this draft what they're thinking. Because if they pick a running back on day 3, now again that's rounds 4 through 7. Ray Davis was a 4th rounder. Is Ray Davis a full-time 25 touch a game guy? I don't think so. And maybe there's not many of those guys in those later rounds. But if they happen to pick one, you start to wonder, maybe that's going to be the plan. Maybe you get a guy in as a rookie this year. He joins this rotation, probably wouldn't play much, but now you're thinking ahead if you're not going to have James Cook, if you don't want to get involved with a franchise tag or extending him. I think the draft will maybe tip their hand as to what they're thinking about on James Cook.
Yeah, I would absolutely expect them at some point, I think, to draft a running back for the exact reasons you mentioned. And here's another thing with investing the kind of money that James Cook wants, and whether it is with the tag ultimately or you try and work something out with him in more of the near term here on something on a longer type deal, his pass protection abilities or lack thereof, there's a problem there. So again, you're tying up that kind of resource on a guy who is, yes, a tremendously dynamic offensive player and finds the end zone and all of those things and provides a dimension along with Josh Allen that makes them very difficult to defend. But pass protection's a problem. Yeah. And, that limits what you can do with him in some key situations.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to pay a guy, $10 million plus a year, you'd want him to be on the field on third downs, and he's not on the field enough on third down because, like you said, pass protection. He's been an okay receiver, but Ty Johnson's every bit as good a receiver as James Cook is, and he is a better pass protector. So that's an issue. He was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, I think, that Chad Johnson, who's the other guy on that podcast, I forget, Nightcap, it's called, Shannon Sharp. And he said, yeah, I need to be on the field more than I'm on the field. And I think he did understand why he wasn't on the field as much as, some of the top tier running backs. So maybe that's something he works on in the OTAs and training camp. It would be nice to get him on the field more than 48% of the snaps, which is what he played this year. If he wants big money, then you got to start being a more all-around type of back. And I'm not saying that he's not a good player. He's been a very good player for them. He had 16 touchdowns last year. That's an impressive season. But he needs to be on the field more if he wants that big contract.
Agreed. All right, Sal, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. All right. What have you got coming up in the Democrat and Chronicle? I see you're writing some baseball these days too, which is
well, I did
that's in your wheelhouse as well.
Our Rochester Red Wings are opening against the Buffalo Bisons on Friday afternoon, and then the home opener in Rochester is here, so I'll be over for that. I think I'm going to start paying attention to the Amerks, who are having a very nice season, and I'll probably cover their playoff games. And then as for the Bills, I've kind of been playing hooky for 2 weeks. It's been pretty quiet. I've written a few stories, but we're in that period right now, the end of free agency before the draft. It'll get kicked up here in the next couple of weeks with, you start thinking ahead to the draft, but not a whole lot going on in Bills land right now.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed your time away from me, because that's coming to an end.
I was definitely missing you and wondering where you were. When I saw that you weren't on Sports Talk last week, I'm thinking, oh man, what's going on? What have I not heard? And then I got the word that your dog was down for a bit. So
yeah, we were up We were up in Oakville, just outside of Toronto, and surgery was Tuesday morning of this week. It was a consult on Monday, and it was hard to get in. So that's when they told us they could do it. So we made the arrangements. But like you said, it's been relatively quiet, but that is about to change. When the calendar turns to April, right, things start picking up. So we'll look forward to it. Another year of Believe in Bills. So for Sal Mayorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I am Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV Buffalo, and Sports Talk Live every Monday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you for being with us here on Believe in Bills.